Hello friends, welcome to this Vkakarla channel. Today we are going to discuss a SpringBoot microservice exception handling. So in our microservice world, what are the best approaches to deal with this exception handling? So what approach is the best for this exception handling? I am going to discuss now. So before starting a project and before showing the classes and all, just uh, just I want to discuss surrounding this exception handling, which means the context of this exception handling. So Spring Boot microservice exception handling, right? So before that, we should know what is an exception. An exception is an event which occurs during the execution of a program that disturbs the normal flow of the program's instructions or code, right? So whatever we are writing a code, suddenly it will terminate the code due to some a conditional fail due to some exception. So that we can call it as an exception. So how we are going to handle this exception? So that is what I'm going to discuss now. So context of this exception handling. So how we are going to handle exceptions in our Spring Boot microservice. Are we using custom exception? Are we using Spring enabled exception? Custom exception means an exception, the custom exception class, it will extended by the either runtime exception or exception class. So that exception we can call it as a custom exception. So are we using a Spring enabled exception? A Spring enabled exception handling is nothing but a Spring Boot is providing response entity exception handler is the class which will take care about all the exceptions coming from the application. So that is Spring enabled exception handling. So are we using custom plus Spring Boot enabled exception handling? Yes, we are using, we are going to use custom plus Spring Boot enabled exception handling. So in one place we are going to handle custom exceptions as well as Spring Boot enabled exceptions also, which means our custom exceptions we will format the error in a specific format, error in a specific format, and for throwing that exception we will take care from we will take the help from the Spring enabled exception class. So how we are going to format that exception error response, how we are going to handle that exceptions in our from our microservice, we are going to discuss now. So before going to a project, we should know two components from the Spring enabled exception handling. One is controller advice, another one is exception handler. So at the rate controller advice is an annotation to handle the exceptions globally, which means so whatever wherever the exceptions are occurred throughout the project, all exceptions all exceptions, the controller advice is the is will take care about the all exceptions throughout the application, and it will take that exceptions or it will catch that exception and delegate to the exception handler to handle the error response to the client. So now coming to exception handler. Exception handler is an annotation used to handle the specific exceptions and sending the custom response to the client, right? Whatever exceptions are taken or delegated from the controller advice, it will take that exceptions and it will prepare some custom exceptions from that, and that custom exception, custom response, it will send the response to the client. So how we are going to prepare a custom exceptions using exception handler, we will see now. So coming to project. So for the project sector C, in this session, we are going to discuss only exception handling. If you want to know all these annotations, if you want to know Swagger related information, if you want to know other things, database related information, property file related information, or pom.xml related information, you should refer a previous sessions. I clearly explain each and every annotation or each and every configuration from these services in previous sessions. Please refer or watch previous sessions. From this session, we will know how we are handling and exception handling in our microservice. So now I am opening one of the package. called exception handling error. So first of all, I'm opening custom exception. So I already told you, right? Custom exception, you should extend either exception or runtime exception. I'm simply extending an exception class. So here just I defined two variables. One is the string message, one is the HTTP status. Message is nothing but we are going to give the message with respect to a specific exception. Status is we are going to define with respect to specific exception, whether it is a bad request, whether it is a bad request related exception, whether it is a internal server related exception. Based on that exception scenario, we will give the message and status dynamically. So for that, I created one constructor as well as setters and getters for this field to hold the data dynamically. Coming to error response, after creating an exception, I want to prepare some error response to the client. So I defined a format like this: status code, a message, and details. So like that, I will send the response to the client. Okay. For these two classes, okay, where we are going to handle these exceptions, where we are catching these exceptions. Now, a custom I already told you, right? Spring enabled exception handler is this class, response entity exception handler. So our custom exception handler is extended from the response entity handler. So only I defined two methods. So if you want to define more than two methods which are available from the Spring response entity exception handler, you can define from this class. So if you open this class, if you see this here, so many predefined classes, predefined exception classes are there. So apart from that, I want to handle all types of exceptions from my custom exceptions only, from my custom exception class only. So that is the reason I added a custom exception here, and I'm preparing error response here, and I'm sending a response entity of errors here. So the response entity errors and status is nothing but always the REST application will throw the either success or response from the response entity only. So that is the reason we are returning here a response entity. Okay. So here, as we discussed, controller advice. So controller advice I defined on top of global exception handler class, and at the right exception handler I defined within that class. Why? Because globally it will catch all the exceptions and it will delegate to the exception handler by creating custom exception class from different exception places. What are the different exception places? I will show you. So here, after getting this custom exception, obviously we will get the custom exception object. From that object, we are going. I am taking here a status and the status name and message as well as details. I am preparing this error response. So after that, I'm passing this. So before running the debug mode, just I want to run this code once. Just apart from that, if you want to see controller, in a controller, just uh, get employee by employee ID, right? This is the one API. By giving employee ID, we are getting the employee details. So before passing this employee ID, just in a validation util is nothing but this is the one type of custom request employee request validation util. This is the one user defined class where I am checking this employee ID is a valid or invalid. If it is an invalid, I'm going to create an exception. Just through exception, I want to say it is a bad request. Employee ID should be positive number. If the client is sending a 0 or less than 0, so it should be a positive number. So this is nothing but a user defined validation, and this exception comes under a bad request category. So that is the reason I'm passing this message, and I'm sending a respective status code is the bad request. So sorry, whenever we are creating this exception, we need to see while we are creating an exception, we need to use throw whenever we are creating an exception, we need to use throw keyword. And if you want to throw that exception to the catching place, we need to use throws. So where we are catching this exception, who will respond? We will take the responsibility of catching this exception. Obviously, a custom exception handler. Why? Because we defined at that control database, right? So dynamically, Spring container will take that wherever from where we are throwing that exception, it will catch that exception. If any exception handler is going to handle that particular exception, it will delegate. So obviously, using that exception handler, we are catching that custom exception class here, and we are preparing the error response here, and we are throwing that error response as in terms of response entity. So right. So now we are going to run this application. We are going to check how it is working, and see, that is one scenario. And coming to another scenario. So if the employee ID is valid employee ID, then we are going to the service. So if it is a valid but no record found, no record from the database, so that type of exception we will know it as a not found exception. So based on that exception or based on the condition, we have a different HTTP status codes. But to handle this scenario, we need to create a one custom exception, employee not found for the given ID, and a respective status, not found status. So that this message will go to the again custom exception handler class, and where we are preparing a custom response to the client by taking these messages dynamically in that class. So now I'm going to run this class in a debug mode. Yeah, the application is running. Okay, fine. So just I want to open user interface for this microservice. I configured Swagger, right? Swagger URL. To know about the Swagger, you can refer Session-1 and Session-2. You will know very well about the Swagger. Swagger is a REST API document, and user interface as well as for the RESTful applications. So here we have two APIs. One is the save employee and one is the employee ID. So for the success response, we will get the without error, we will get the response, right? So if we want to get the success response, if you want to see the success response also, we need some save API. So that is the reason I added this save employee. So just before going to that, and also one more method is there. Handle method arguments not valid is the one API, predefined API is there from the response entity exception handler. So for this, we no need to create an exception. It will take care about that, get all the results from that controller class if we are giving some invalid inputs from the object. So more than one object, more than one error, it will deals. So whenever we are going to save, if I don't want to give some names or some information here, just ID 0 and right. See, if I execute this, see what will happen, we will see. So here exception directly it is coming to the response entity exception handler. So after that, it is binding the result, all the errors here. So it is sending to the response to the here. So this is the error format. This is the specific error format. A status seed 400. Message is validation failed. So department must not be empty and email must not be empty. So these are the two values I given empty, right? And address. Why we are not getting for address in validation? So just I want to show you here in entities. See, for this information you can watch previous sessions. So in entities, simply I put the not empty on top of field. So this is related to database column. This is related to validation. Okay, no worry, don't confuse. So here not empty message, at the rate not empty message, on top of email I put, on top of department I put, on top of last name I given, on top of first name I given, but the address I didn't given, right? So that is the reason we didn't get the address related validation. So remaining I given some empty string, right? So it is taking some valid input. So that is the reason we got two error messages, right? Like that we can get the error details. So how we are going to get that details? If you see that controller controller @valid a response body of employee. So here we are passing in terms of save API, we are passing employee object. So in the total employee object we are giving @valid. So for Spring container will take this @valid ID and it will check whether the person or this developer is handling this particular method arguments not allowed exception is uh, going to is actually is taking that method arguments not valid exception class is taking to handle that custom exception handler or not. It will check, yes, we are handling here. So if you see that custom exception handler, right, method arguments, why method arguments? Our employee object is the argument for the save API, right? So that is the reason it will take. So it will take, and wherever we are putting not empty annotation on top of a particular entity, so it will take and see here, right? Because of this annotation, it will catch the all the errors and it will binding the result, and we are adding this error details to the our response error response, right? We are preparing error response here. Same that error response we are giving to the response entity, whether it is a success response, failure response, it will take care about response entity. If it is a failure response, the response entity will catch the errors here. If it is a success response, the response entity will catch that success response in a controller class. So in a controller class, right? So in a controller class, the controller class will, the job of this controller class, it will take the request and it will give the response. If it is a success response, the response will go here. If it is a failure response, the response will throw, exception will throw, and after preparing the exception, the response will coming from the response entity exception handler class, that is extended by our custom exception handler class. From here the error response will come. So now just I want to give the valid details. So address Hyderabad, department Java microservice, email Vkakarla @gmail.com, first name Veerraju, ID 101. Just I'm giving some information. Vkakarla, just I want to execute this. Yes, successfully saved. So whether we are getting it is successfully saved or not, just I want to get the details from here. So okay, yes, we are getting the whatever we saved, that information we are getting the information here. Now what is our intention here? Just I want to throw some exceptions by giving some negative input. So I'm giving some negative input here. So this is the 400 and bad request, employee ID should be positive number. So how we are preparing this error response, where we are catching this where we are validating this input and where we are creating exception, we are going to see now. So from the controller here, right, just I enable the debug. Now I am going to execute once again. The flow come here. So in a validation util, see, as a developer responsibility, before calling the service from our controller class, the developer responsibility is to validate the input fields. So that is the developer should validate the input fields, whatever we are input information, whatever we are passing from this method, right? So for that reason, I created a validation util, and the validate employee ID is the one of the method from this util. And here I am checking if the input is less than 0, which means it is not a positive number, then I'm creating an exception. What kind of exception? The employee ID should be positive number. This is the message I want to send to the client, as well as a bad request. This exception will comes under bad request category of HTTP response. So that is the reason I added HTTP response here. So why our service is a microservice, right? So we should give the HTTP status codes based on the exceptions. So here a bad request kind of exception. So that is the reason by using custom exception, I created an exception class here, and I given some message related to this particular scenario, and I given HTTP bad request uh, status under this category, and just simply creating an exception and throwing this exception from here. Who will catch this exception? Our custom exception handler will catch this exception by using @controller database, and it will delegate this exception class to the @exception handler. So @exception handler we are using there. So just I am just I want to go there. So okay, fine. So we will come. Now it is coming here, right? It will come here. See, obviously the condition will satisfy. So here we are creating an exception. So now, okay, I will resume here. Now the controller is coming here. So the control advice is catching that exception from where we are throws that exception, and it will delegate to the exception. Why? Because our exception exception handler is handling the all custom exceptions, right? It is coming here. So whatever we are creating an exception class, that information is coming to the this exception class. If you see that message, employee ID should be positive number, where we are in the validation util we given this message, and status bad request is giving there. So these two informations are coming from this custom exception class, and now we are preparing our error response here. So error response here. So error response, it is a format, right? It is a simple kind of format, error format. So here I'm preparing that, and also I'm passing this response entity errors. So you can have some small doubt here. We are also having an error response. In that error response, we will have a status and status code, right? And why you are giving a status here again? So simple. Response entity always expect object as well as status also. So that is the reason again I'm giving status here. And this is the kind of bad request. Only one scenario it will handle when we are giving whole object to the method argument. It is simply bad request category. So that is the reason I'm giving statically here. But this is the custom exception, where we get all kind of exceptions in a different places. If it is a valid invalid scenario, we will get the bad request related thing. If it is a valid scenario, if you are not found any record from the database, it's kind of not found related error. So all the errors we will get the dynamically from the exception class. So just I'm resuming this. See here, we are getting status code 400, a message is a bad request, and detailed message is nothing but employee ID should be positive number. Okay, I will give positive number, but for this side we are not having a record here, a record from the database. We know, right? 101 only, we have only one record. So just I'm executing this. So now where we are getting, obviously the flow comes here. It is a positive number, it will not enter the inside if condition. Exactly. So now we are going to come here, service simple. So in a service simple, obviously we will get the null response. Why? Because for this 102 1012 we are not having ID. If you want to confirm that, I will show you the database. Okay, database is not open. Okay, I will open and I will show you. For the database information and all, you can see the previous. So here I used this See here 101, right? This is only we have for 1020 whatever we given some valid ID. For that ID we don't have a record, so that is the reason we got the null response here. So if it is a null, we are throwing a custom exception. So always developer responsibility to check whether the input field are valid or not. If it is a valid case, and always we check whether the response is null or not. So if it is not null, we are passing. If it is a null, we are throwing exception. So here what kind of error we are throwing? Employee not found for given ID, this is the message. And what kind of status? Not found status. So this status will go. So like that we are passing the dynamic error messages and dynamic error status codes throughout the application. Wherever we got an exception, this kind of exception, wherever there is a chance, right? Wherever got the chances of this kind of uh, exceptions, from there we are passing the exception by creating a custom exception message and delegating this exception class to the our Spring response entity handler. So now it is coming here. So again, what is the message? Right? What is the status? Not found. Sorry, right? So like that we are preparing error response and passing to the front end, to the client response. So like that. So this is what an exception handling. So our next session will be started in a few days. I will upload that video, and code of this project code I will give the under this description link. You can like and subscribe my channel. You will get more number of technical videos in kind of from the microservices world using Spring Boot environment. So thank you guys, and thanks for watching.